Good afternoon. I'm here with my guest, Buell Hollister. How you doing, Buell?
Very good.
Good to hear. Buell is the author of Leeram and Fordlandia, a new novel from Merrimack Media. Buell has had a varied career as a newspaper, radio. He's been a stringer for UPI and works for Tufts University. And later in his career, he worked in the as a sort of marine biologist.
Right, for the division of Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries.
Marine fisheries. So a very varied and interesting career. I'd like to ask you, Buell, in your book, Leeram and Fordlandia, could you just give us, the audience, a basic synopsis of what happens in there?
Well, it's a hard book to fit into a genre because I would describe it essentially as a humor, satire kind of thing. I got the idea from a friend of mine who actually, at the beginning of the book, actually did have a shrunken head.
He was a dentist, right?
He was a dentist, yes. He was a good friend. And as I begin the book with a description, really, which is pretty close to the actual occasion, we'd had a few drinks, and he showed me the head, and then he put it away, and that's the last I ever saw of it. But it's hard to forget. How do you unsee a shrunken head once you've seen it? And over the years, I had it in the back of my mind, and about a couple of years ago, I decided to write a short story, and using that head as a starting point. And the protagonist finds himself helping this dentist's widow, after he died, clean up the house and de-accession a few things that she had of his, and the head was high on the list of things she wanted to get rid of. The fictional wife of the dentist's widow, and so the protagonist, without thinking, basically says, "Sure, I'll take it," and that's where it all begins. He has it around the house, almost like a piece of bric-a-brac, and he slowly gets used to it. He says to himself, "Well, it's a perfect roommate. It doesn't drink any liquor of mine. It doesn't eat any of my food." And he begins to think of it just as some sort of, bric-a-brac, something that you have on a shelf and look at now and then, not in a morbid way. So it becomes apparent after a while that the head, in fact, is sentient, and but not in a scary way. As a matter of fact, the head has a personality. More like a New York cab driver. He's kind of a wiseacre.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I mean, it reminded me of an old Twilight Zone or something like that, where the guy was a puppeteer and the cat was a wisecracking sort of vulgar, sort of guy.
Yeah, exactly, and of course, Gilbert Greenbush, the protagonist, is someone who would probably, had he not run into this head, have spent the rest of his life as a barista in some off-the-wall, out-of-the-way coffee shop, and been perfectly happy.
Why do you say that about? Was he in any way like you at one point in your life?
Well, only in a very short time. I was jolted out of that by other things, but only vaguely. I can't really say that I was at all like that in a real sense.
And so what was it? How would you characterize him? Why would he stay?
I would characterize him as someone, Gilbert Greenbush, as somebody who had enormous potential, a huge reservoir, but never, he was in a situation that never prompted him to delve into it, to get into that, to take advantage of it. It took the head, which became his alter ego.
And the women.
And the woman, yes, and several women.
Yeah.
Ranging from Lisa LePage, who was gorgeous, and Suxie Redbone, who was an Amazon. And Suxie Redbone, I imagine her as being about 6'5", and just larger than life, and with a very, very commanding presence. People did what she told them to do, and so the two are friends. They meet in an anti-fur protest in which the protesters are all wearing nothing except a banner, and it's a pretty striking sight. At least, of course, Leeram by this time, of course, was quite aware of everything too. Leeram was amused by it, and they wind up, Leeram, Gilbert, Suxie Redbone, and Lisa wind up, after quite a long series of events, as a team. I won't go into them all right now. And they
go to Brazil, right?
Yes,
but this is all a plot to get Leeram back from the
right.
clutches
At one point,
of
right. Leeram is fascinated by Suxie Redbone, and so.
But doesn't he want to get away from her?
Well, actually, Leeram wanted to spend time with Suxie.
Oh, I thought Suxie, maybe I misread this, but he was just sitting there with all the incense and he was getting along.
Oh, right. And by then he'd been there long enough.
Okay.
And he wanted to get back.
Yeah.
So they wind up, Gilbert and Lisa wind up as a couple. Leeram and Suxie Redbone wind up as a quasi-couple, but they separate because Leeram wants to get back.
I mean, it must be
right. It was the incense, I think, that got him. Because don't forget, he's a wiseacre.
Yeah.
He can't get too deeply into
and
that.
Then, and so basically this goes, we don't want to give away the whole story, but basically they go to Brazil, and actually they go into a place that I've forgotten about, but I used to read about, and I forgot about it. There is an actual Fordlandia.
There really is Fordlandia, yeah.
And that was where Ford Motor Company went into.
Yeah. There's a guy, there's an author called Greg Landon who wrote a wonderful history of Fordlandia. And also Michael Palin, the Brit, Michael, I just blanked it. You know what I mean? The guy who had that wonderful show with the four guys. Anyway, it'll pop into my mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he wrote a wonderful book, a great travel book about Brazil, and he went to Fordlandia.
Is that still around? This sort of abandoned town?
Monty Python.
That's what I was thinking.
Right, yeah.
Is Fordlandia still there?
It's still there. What happened was that
Ford went in there and they built this place for rubber workers.
Right.
The
Ford Motor Company liked to have sort of a vertical control over everything. They had their own steel mills. They had their own wood making equipment for the spokes and the wheels and this kind of thing, but they didn't have their own source of rubber. So he decided to simply create his own rubber plantation. He took a town, the plans for a typical Midwestern town, architecture, the gazebo, the bandstand, the whole thing, the church, the hospital, transplanted that whole thing down into the jungle, which was strange, to begin with.
Right.
And very strange, and for a lot of reasons, most of which had to do with kind of arrogant assumption that he knew how to do these things better than any native rubber plantation person. So he did it, and of course it was a disaster. It was a complete disaster. It never worked, and they moved the location a couple of times. It's still, they just didn't do it. And it finally, of course, to the final straw was the invention of synthetic latex about during World War II. So all of a sudden there was no need for this thing, and he gave it back to the Brazilian government, and the jungle took it over.
Took it over.
Yeah, right.
And but they use it as a base for their humanitarian efforts down in
Oh yeah, yeah. They did some good down there. Wouldn't say, but by the when the Ford Motor Company left.
No, I'm talking about in the novel they used.
Yeah. Oh yes. Still on this word. Yes, they have. They do. Suxi, of course, Suxi Redbone, being directly descended from that native population, felt a really strong connection with them, and so what they do is they try to set up a self-sustaining agricultural community down there, and end up stumbling across the rainforests. This is what fascinated me. The rainforest is full to this day of things we know nothing about, and I don't mean that in a sort of spooky sense, but there are
Species.
potential species, the sources of drugs we have no idea about, and so I thought, why not have a type of plant down there that has the ability to produce electricity, a very, like the ultimate green source of electricity. So that's in there too, and the characters go in there. I think one of the.
Have you ever been in the Amazon?
I've never been in the Amazon. I've been to a rainforest, but I've never been to that particular spot. The thing is, these days there is so much video footage of every square inch down there.
The planet.
Exactly. It's on YouTube. It's everywhere else. It's easy to go online and visit.
Right.
Fordlandia.
A virtual visit.
Yeah, a virtual visit. Yeah.
So basically, you have this sort of hapless character, Gilbert. He's working as a barista, has a shrunken head, forms an alliance with the shrunken head, and the shrunken head is sort of like a New York cab driver with its sensibilities.
Right.
He meets this Lisa, an eco person, and then Suaxi gets Leeram, who's like her leader.
Yeah.
And they go down to Brazil, and he creates this elaborate scheme so he can get Leeram back from Suaxi, right?
Exactly.
Who he misses.
But Leeram has the ineffable ability to cut through bullshit.
Right.
And this is Leeram's great value, that he calls it like he sees it, and especially things, for example, naked PETA anti-fur protests and things like that. Not that that's, all of the modern stuff. He has this sort of basic, almost primitive laser that he
built-in shit detector.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly what it is. And so, because he's a wise guy. I mean, not in the sense of mafia wise guy, but because he doesn't hold back. He tells it like he sees it, and quite often, I mean, he was the reason that Gilbert Greenbush became what he eventually did. The character changes during the book. It becomes a whole, a man in full. I mean, he takes charge of things. He creates essentially a great presence down there.
Now, you say you're 76?
76. Be 77 next month. Yeah.
And this is your first
yes.
effort at novels. So what brought you to do this?
I started to write short stories a few years ago, and at first I couldn't get them published, but lately I'm getting a trickle published in literary magazines and this sort of thing. But as a matter of fact, Leeram began as a short story, and I've had them published now in Empty Sink, Temenos magazine, things like that. I have a bunch of them circulating out there, and but about a year and a half ago, I decided to write a novel, and uh, I found that it was just a matter. Someone said the way you learn to write a novel is to write a novel, and so I was told, did what I was told, put the seat of my pants on the seat of the chair, and wrote the novel. I worked with a good editor, and who was very helpful for me to organize it a little, bring out certain aspects, make certain characters more three-dimensional, and to help organize it. And that was fascinating. I learned a lot. I then reached the point at which I wanted to publish it, and so at first I went to a couple of literary agents, and they took it and they said, this is so off the wall. He says, well written, but it's so off the wall, we don't know who to sell it to or how to sell it to a publisher. And so then I ran into this Merrimack Media, and they are a brand new, as far as I could tell, a brand new concept. 10 years ago, someone like me could have gone to a vanity press and have them publish the book, or I could have finally found a publisher who would then take the book, work with me. 2 years later, I would see a physical book in my hands, and what the hell? I was 70 at the time, 76 when it came out, and I didn't want to wait 2 years or 2.5 years or something. I wanted the book now, and I would have felt differently if I'd done this 40 years ago. I would have much preferred to go the traditional route. But Merrimack Media is great because it's right in the middle. Since they have an ongoing interest in selling the book, they market it. In the old days, the vanity press thing,
Right,
you'd
pay
have
money,
it. Yeah, you'd have
they put an
couple
article
of,
in the New York Times, that
right.
ad in the Times.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a completely new. I'm sure there are plenty of other companies that are like Merrimack Media, but the concept is pretty new, I think. Mm-hmm. And it helps avoid a lot of things. If you go to someone like me, a late starter, in the novel business, if a traditional publishing company had taken it, and they would put it on, get it out there on the market, and if it didn't sell in 3 months, that's it. It'd be pulled, the books would be remaindered, and that would be it. But this way, they stay. The book's available on Amazon. It's at several Kindle, all those places. It's several bookstores too.
Good.
And there is no deadline. If people, I can go for a couple of years, and it's because they print them on demand. So nobody's sitting around with a warehouse full of these things, and I'm fine. I'm working on a sequel, so it may be that it's selling. It's selling at not New York Times bestseller levels, but it's certainly moving.
Good. Good. Now, you also were president of the August St. Batal Club. Could you give us, for those who don't know about the St. Batal Club, maybe you can give us a brief description and what your role was as president of the St. Batal Club.
Oh, well, the St. Batal Club is an old, venerable institution. It was started in 1880, and it's had many very accomplished members over the years. It's a club that's
it's
centered around the arts.
Street in Boston in a mansion, right? So.
It's in an old Newbury or Commonwealth Avenue mansion.
Oh, Commonwealth.
And it's centered around the arts. It celebrates visual arts, painting, music, writing. Robert Frost was a member. Saul Bellow was a member, and Yo-Yo Ma is a member of it. these are obviously the majority of the membership isn't of that height of celebrity, but we have quite a few very talented people, and it's people like that, and of course scientists, the arts and sciences, and plenty of people. I know one retired MIT professor, physics professor, who became a sculptor in his later years, and all entirely because of the club. People join to enjoy the arts, support the arts, or in fact contribute to the arts.
That's great. And your role as president, you just sort of, what did you do?
Oh, I must have walked out of the room. No, you know that old joke about, you know, I was elected when I went out to the bathroom or something.
Yeah.
It's a
Full-time job?
not a full-time job, but I would say when I was doing it, it took about 35 hours a week, 30 to 35 hours a week, and it was interesting. It was really, plenty of people there who are much more august than I was, but I had the time to do it, so
Great.
I essentially volunteered to do it. So.
Good. Now, why don't you read from your, you got about 7 minutes.
Okay.
So why don't you read from your novel, Leeram, Leeram in Fordlandia?
Yes, in Fordlandia. I thought it was a kind of the idea of using Fordlandia as a stage for this was kind of irresistible. I think I'll start just with the first page.
Okay.
Just a couple of paragraphs.
Okay.
The shrunken head had the feel of an old dog-chewed baseball as I lifted it out of its wooden box. Its owner, a friend who was also my dentist, poured us both another dollop of Jim Beam. I got it from a guy years ago when I was in South America, he said. He was down on his luck and needed $20. He told me he won it in a poker game. A voyeurish thrill, almost like a feeling I knew I shouldn't have, teased me as I looked at it. Its eyes were sewn shut, and beaded sisal strings dangled from its lips. Its features were at the same time very human and very distorted. The eyes and mouth were closed, of course, but the cheeks and forehead were out of proportion, much smaller than the nose and mouth, which were protuberant. The hair was luxurious and closely bunched, tied in the back into a little black ponytail that would never, ever get gray. And then let's see here, the chapter 2. Of course, Leeram, his head is in our universe, but Leeram exists on another plane. So I had to create a place for him to live. Get this out right. He's talking to Leeram. Leeram says, "The universe is a lot wilder and woollier than you can imagine. Everyone wants to live forever, and they've told each other a lot of fairy tales to make them feel better about dying. Also to keep them in line by scaring them about stories about hell and damnation." Leeram sighed, then went on, "There was only one person who came anywhere close about the afterlife. Your guy, Homer. He tells about it in the Odyssey, when Odysseus, or Ulysses, goes down through a cave into Hades and meets his mom and a bunch of his old fighting buddies who are very concerned about their reputations in the world of the living. You know about Homer?" I asked. "Look, big guy, once you're in this end, everyone knows about Homer. He's kind of like your Columbus to us. Some of us think he actually created the place we live in. Ulysses actually made a two-way trip through a wormhole into this universe, the one where I live and everyone else who used to be in yours. I'll tell you later how improbable that is. Hades is infinitely expandable. The laws of physics are different." And then go on from there.
Didn't in the book wasn't there a exploration of the afterlife, if I'm not mistaken?
In this
A
book?
wormhole.
In this book.
Yeah.
Yes, because it sort of several characters, including Henry Ford himself, are there, and so there is a slight through them. There's going to be more of that, I think, in the sequel,
Okay.
which I'm working on. So, skipping forward here. I've been okay. Sorry,
By the way, you have some event coming up at the St. Paul Club, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. What? Maybe
right.
you could tell the audience about that.
Well, yeah. The only problem with that is that it's limited to 20 people. 'Cause yeah. So that's pretty much all signed up for.
Okay.
But I'm having in July a radio interview.
With who?
I'm just trying to think. It's another one person in your group in that Saturday morning.
Radio interview?
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you in a second. I have to look it up. So they wind up down there, and he winds up with this lovely young woman who's about 20 years younger than he is, Lisa. And he goes down to their local town that is close by. So once aboard the ferry, nondescript and crowded compared to the Dalma Falso, we found a space for our hammocks as far from the bar as possible, where a loudspeaker was blasting samba music all day long. We brought our own food for the trip. Aboard, we were surrounded by chickens, families with large broods of children, mostly crying, and men who had never moved from the bar except to pee over the side. Here, I was alone with Lisa at last, and lacking the tiniest sliver of privacy, but somehow our hammocks side by side and almost touching, we managed to create a kind of intimacy during the trip, especially after nightfall. We spoke in low voices to each other and more or less willed an invisible wall around us. Once, when the din was replaced by a muted rumble of snoring, diluted and softened by the ferry's engine, I reached across and took her hand. She squeezed mine and said, "I'm so glad we're by ourselves, finally." My heart jumped. And they go forward, they get to the hotel. "We would like 2 rooms, please," I said to the clerk.